I think I heard gunshots. When I texted this to my mom, my first thought was that a robbery had gone badly, or maybe a drug deal. A robbery seemed more plausible, but neither scenario made sense in my quiet, tree-lined Squirrel Hill neighborhood in Pittsburgh. Then I heard the sirens. The wailing got louder and louder as ambulances, SWAT vehicles, and patrol cars careened down my street as I watched from my window. My friend texted me that there had been a shooting at the Tree of Life synagogue at the end of my block. I'm Jewish. I know people there. I frantically searched the internet for confirmation. A lone British website was the first to report that yes, there had been a shooting there, many shots fired, not just one. I soon learned that a man armed with several guns had gone into the synagogue to kill as many Jews as he could. Innocent people who were gathered there for services. I was in shock. How could this be happening in a country built on the principles of religious freedom and the right to peaceful assembly? How could it be happening in my city, Pittsburgh, ranked as America's most livable? How could it be happening in my neighborhood, one of the most vibrant, diverse, and welcoming Jewish communities in the United States? I am young, but not so naive as to believe that history has no contradictions or ironies. It is a pattern of zigzags, of forwards and backwards, but this, in 2018, at the end of my street, did not seem possible. The truth is that this incident was a kind of robbery, a robbery of life, of 11 good people's identities, of their dignity and potential for doing good, of their right to gather in their synagogue and study scripture. It was a robbery of humanity committed by one man whose ideological and political views were rooted in hatred and prejudice. At first, I felt sick and stunned, and then sad, and then angry, and then back to sad for all of the police officers who got hurt. Then I felt horrified by the faces on TV, family members, friends, and neighbors of the victims whose lives were all torn apart by one man with an assault rifle. But then as the hours went by, I felt emboldened. Several candlelight vigils were held in Squirrel Hill that first night. I went to the first and witnessed incredible support from all of Pittsburgh's communities and religious denominations. I did not go to the second vigil. Instead, I went to hear the powerfully positive speech of Magda Brown, a Holocaust survivor, sponsored by the Chatham University Women's Institute and the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. Her message was clear. We will survive in the face of any type of hatred. She had survived the worst of it. Since the shooting, I have had far more questions than answers in my head. Did Robert Bowers ever know any Jews personally? Had he ever had a conversation with a Jewish person? Where had he learned his hatred of Jews? Who were his teachers? Did the internet play a role? What was he so afraid of that he would feel called to violently destroy so many lives, including his own? And what's going on in our whole country these days as people separate themselves into camps of left and right, us and them? Can political extremists ever reach a middle ground? In 2017, at the Student Diversity Leadership Conference in Anaheim, California, I was introduced to the power of dialogue as a bridge to understanding, a means of connecting people across race, culture, religion, identity, and socioeconomic divides. There, selected high school students and faculty engaged in free and open discussion about politically divisive topics. Assumptions were challenged, opinions were evolving. Inspired, I applied to the Seeds of Peace camp in Maine, where for 3 weeks I talked with other kids about our cultural identities and learned how to share and listen in equal measure. The goal of the dialogues was not to convert anyone to a different position or angle on any issue, but simply to listen and understand to different points of view. We were given the opportunity to hear other kids' personal stories and experiences, and then reevaluate our own viewpoints. I realized then that only by being exposed to another person's story can we truly begin to understand our own. By learning the reasons for others' differences and opinions, we begin to make sense of them and even respect them. To stop these forms of hatred, I founded a quarterly dialogue program called the Dialogue Project in partnership with Repair the World, a Jewish nonprofit whose mission is to aim to make service a defining part of American Jewish life. We are experiencing an increasingly divided nation, and tragic events based on hatred that are taxing our politics and national identity. I'm designing and leading these dialogue sessions open to all faiths, identities, and backgrounds based on dialogue as a productive and peaceful tool to bring communities and narratives together over social, political, and economic divides that can breed hateful activity. My experience in dialogue has cemented my view that it is essential to solving the misunderstanding and fear that underlies so many of our conflicts. Robert Bowers was on a social media platform called Gab, where white supremacists talk to each other in their own sealed echo chamber, never engaging in dialogue with people outside or hearing other people's stories and experiences. Seeds of hate are sown on that site. I'm reminded of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's powerful TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story. The danger of talking or listening only to those who agree with you was shockingly apparent on the shooting in Squirrel Hill on Saturday, October 27, 2018. Bowers had cocooned himself in an airless space of ignorance, fear, and confusion. He brought death and destruction into the tree of life, and all for nothing. When he was admitted into the ER at Allegheny General Hospital for his own gunshot wounds, he shouted, "I want to kill all the Jews." He was being treated by a Jewish doctor and nurse. I don't believe that any one person has single-handedly caused this rise of hate speech. I do believe that failure to call out hate speech in our current political climate for what it is, a fomenter of extremism, has encouraged white supremacists and anti-Semites to be more vocal. I will always wonder if safe and rational dialogue at home, at school, at a house of worship, or at a workplace might have saved Robert Bowers and his 11 victims from their tragic fate. We will never know. What I do know is that it couldn't have hurt and it might have helped. My anger and sadness have fueled my desire and passion to reach out to more people and engage them in the dialogue project. I need and want to make a difference, and I hope you all do too.